I just want to introduce myself really, really quickly because many of you I don't know. And I do look forward to getting to know all of you. I'm Donna Margolis. I made Aliyah about 3 months ago, almost to the date. Before that, just a few weeks before that, I joined the staff of Chappelle's and Midreshet Rachel as the director of philanthropy. Very much a coming home in many, many ways, both to Israel and to Chappelle's and Midreshet Rachel. I was a student here 20 years ago, together with my husband, who was, of course, in the men's school, and I was at Midreshet Rachel. I also worked for Chappelle's and Midreshet Rachel going back about 20 years. And since then, I hope have continued to be very close and connected to the organization because I truly feel that this is the best place in the world to be. And it was really my dream to be able to come back and be together with all of the amazing people here. And 3 months, I can say there's no place I'd rather be. It's really been fantastic. And meeting so many of you and the ones that I haven't yet met, I very much look forward to meeting is definitely the highlight of the work that I do here. Ariel's asking if my husband, my husband is Adam. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. And we were here in 2000 and 2001. Definitely, the highlight of our life together so far, and will continue, I think, to be that. I just want to tell you one or two things about what's going on here in Jerusalem. I think it's important to stay connected. The Beis Medrash is thriving. The women are fantastic at the women's school. And we are all davening that really things open up here finally. We got very good news that July 1st, we should be able to welcome more people into the country. Tourists certainly can come in, and hopefully that will open the doors for us finally to be able to welcome in the students that have been waiting so patiently to get in. So with that good news, there's one thing I would like to ask of everybody just to consider is that we have such a great program and we want more students to benefit from our program. And you really are our ambassadors. So if you have ideas for young people or not so young people that might benefit from our program, with God's help and a lot of davening, we should be able to get them into the country again soon. And we would really love to have them here at Chappelle's and Midreshet Rachel. I would like to introduce a very special alum of Chappelle's, Dr. Elon Carton. He's there on the screen. Maybe wave to us, Dr. Carton, so we see you. Thanks. Dr. Carton is a psychologist who's here living in Israel. I asked him to join us tonight because I think that it's really important for us to hear from somebody who's really been in the field of mental health, working throughout Corona, I'm sure tirelessly to help the community, to really help us to understand what people have been experiencing. And I think there's nobody better that could join us and help us out with that. So I'll just give you a 2-second introduction and turn things over to Dr. Carton. He is a clinical psychologist who was trained in the U.S. He made Aliyah in 2007 and lives with his wife, Serena, and their children in Ramat Beit Shemesh. Harnov, terrible. He attended Yeshivat Darchei Noam in 1996 and 1997, and has the zchut, I would say, in Jerusalem of learning in Kollel in the mornings and seeing patients in the afternoons and evenings. And we're very, very happy that he agreed to speak to us for just a few minutes before we turn things over to Rabbi Schuster. So thank you, Dr. Carton. Welcome.
Okay. Well, thanks for that nice introduction. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. It's great to be here with the Chappelle's, Darchei Noam Chevra. I feel tremendous hakaras hatov to this great institution. I'm honored to be part of this event tonight. So I'm speaking to everybody here, but I'm also speaking to myself. Okay, so I heard once that someone said we're all bozos on the bus. So that includes psychologists. And I just wanted to share some insights that might mean something to you. When I was asked to do this talk, I was actually happy because it gave me a chance to kind of evaluate and do my own introspection about what this period of time has been like. We didn't realize it then, but 15 months ago, when news was coming out of Wuhan, China, about a flu-like outbreak, we were a little curious, but we were busy with our normal routine, of our lives, getting to school and work on time, fulfilling family responsibilities, taking care of the kids and planning for perm. After all, we were not in China or planning on going there anytime soon. We'd be fine. We had no idea that our lives were about to undergo a major change of incredible proportions. And then at lightning speed, we learned the word corona or COVID-19. We bought what we now easily consider overpriced masks and gloves, hand sanitizers, updated ourselves on how to protect ourselves and loved ones, learned what it meant to social distance, to quarantine, followed the spread of the epidemic on worldleaders.com. Plans quickly changed. Pesach plans were canceled, schools were closed and then reopened and then closed again in an unending test on our nerves and patience. Our beautiful shuls, yeshivas, and seminaries, places that we took for granted to keep us on a good spiritual path, were following strict social distancing requirements and eventually locked. We delayed or canceled simchas or didn't attend them. We couldn't attend the funerals of people near and dear to our hearts. We learned a new 4-letter word, Zoom, which helped a bit with loved ones we couldn't visit, gave us a respite from the isolation. To a large degree, we went into survival mode. Be'ezrat Hashem, as in Bezrat Hashem, I'm going away next week, or Bezrat Hashem, I'll see you tomorrow, wasn't just the lingo that frum Jews said. When we said it, it seemed more like a tefillah. We were humbled. Without God, we were not going anywhere, not even out of the house once for 14 long days. Everything was Bezrat Hashem with the help of Hashem. Fast forward to Lag BaOmer. I, like others, felt that a month and a half ago, we were finally coming out of the teva of Noach after the flood. And here in Israel and the Jewish world at large, tragedy struck. Meron, Givat Zev, rocket fire. We were being attacked, all at a time when we felt that finally we could communally take that sigh of relief and move back into routine. And moving back into life after Corona, even besides Meron and the war, has not been so easy. It's hard to just pick up where we left off. We feel different, maybe a little more restless or impatient, sadder perhaps, more anxious, being out and about it again, more vulnerable. Our kids' faces look different to us, more worn down. Maybe they developed nervous twitches or unexplained fears. Is it us? Is it them? Did we fail them? They were deprived for many months of doing the things that before Corona struck, we had taken for granted. While it's nice to rekindle old friendships, we may not feel as close to people we once did. The shiurim we so happily attended are starting up again, but we don't feel so excited about going. It's so far away. Maybe it's being recorded on Zoom. I don't want to have to dress up for it. What a schlep. We got used to the conveniences of working from home, learning from home, and even going to a simcha from home. Now we have to deal with traffic and earlier wake-up times. And as much as we don't want to admit it, Corona came in handy sometimes. I'd love to go to the Kiddush, but I'm just makpid on social distancing and I don't feel comfortable. There's no minyan to go to. I'll daven whenever and wherever, wearing whatever. I still remember hearing 15 months ago that my kollel was closing for an indefinite period, and I felt very down about it. So then how come after learning with my chavrusa by phone for over a year and downloading the shiur from Google Drive, I wasn't jumping for joy when 2 months ago they announced that the kollel would be opening and I'd have to take that half an hour bus right away to a kollel that starts at 9:15 in the morning. Not that I get there at 9:15 in the morning. Does this mean there's something wrong with me or my Yiddishkeit? No, I don't believe so. We've gotten used to our new habits. So as psychologists, we're taught to appreciate individual differences, and this comes alive in my practice. Some of my clients thrived during this period. Under the yeshiva capsules, they developed such close connections to other students, it allowed for a bonding that wouldn't have occurred otherwise. When yeshiva closed, they moved in with siblings in different locations and enjoyed the freedom of being more independent. For others, the capsules were emotionally suffocating. And when yeshivas closed, they had to spend more time with family members who they already had problematic relationships with. Some couples felt more stress in their relationship. I remember even after the Meron tragedy, one client felt it was sad, but he said he's ready to move on with the therapy. We're just going to continue where we left off last week. It didn't move him so much. Another young man felt so heartbroken about all those that had died, he couldn't justify talking about his dating life. To him, it was a desecration of their memory, and it felt selfish. So we're all wired differently, and that's okay. It's perfectly normal. And as psychologists, we need to normalize the ambivalence that we're all experiencing as we ask ourselves, how do I move on from here? We know deep down that we don't want to just go back to routine. And what happened to that smile on my face? Russ Harris, he writes in his book, The Happiness Trap, that popular ideas about happiness will actually make you miserable. He points to 3 happiness myths. The first is happiness is a natural state for human beings. The second is happiness means feeling good. And the third is if you're not happy, you're defective. The more tightly one holds on to these beliefs, the more likely it is he's going to feel more miserable if these don't ring true for him or her. So Harris defines happiness instead as living a rich, full, meaningful life where one willingly feels the full range of human emotions. Can we be doing this more in our lives, letting ourselves feel the full range of feelings without a struggle? Can we redefine happiness, not as smiling from ear to ear, but living in concert with our values? We have undoubtedly gone through some hard times these past 50 months. Let's not shame ourselves for having our struggles. I remember as a troubled young husband approaching my Rav for help, and I was telling him about some of the conflicts in my marriage. So he told me, try to look at those conflicts as growing pains. That helped me so much. Can we find a way after these 15 months of growing from this pain? As things, especially in Israel, seem to be behind us, this is a great time to reflect on what this experience did for us, but also did for us, because there were perhaps some good things that came out of this as well. I know me, my brother, and my father now have a Zoom chavrusa on Fridays that we would have never had otherwise. But people are also constantly tethered to their devices. There's no downtime to relax. We've lost the art of daydreaming. We're always occupied with distractions, more demands on our time. People are losing their capacity for empathy and deep conversations, valuing convenience and efficiency. I like this quote. Turkle describes this as the illusion of friendship without the demands of empathy. So taking this time to reflect has to be a priority, or it probably won't happen. We want to strike while the iron is hot, but we also know that this may not be the time to make major life changes. We're still kind of recovering and trying to pick up the pieces. So taking stock is a healthy thing to do at this point, but we need some help figuring out how to do that. So it's my pleasure to introduce Rabbi Schuster, who's also my old Har Nof neighbor, who will share his insights and guide us in how we can do that most effectively.
Okay, thank you, Ilan. Thank you, Dr. Carton. I'm glad you gave that intro because, first of all, speaking about the world of individuals, first of all, it's so beautiful to see so many individuals, names, faces that come back to me in so many different ways. And again, one of the major themes of the yeshiva of Midrash Rachel, I think that you've understood, is that we approach individuals. We don't deal with cookie cutter. We don't deal with systems that are set in place that are come one, come all, and assume that we serve all these different things. Therefore, it's kind of daunting. And I looked at, people were encouraged to send in questions, and I looked at some of the questions, and I have to admit right away that the time frame that we have is not going to be able to touch on even a portion of those questions. I'm going to try to get in touch with the people who sent in questions afterwards to discuss some of them. But nonetheless, with the time we have, I see Kenny Kodesh here, and he was one of my great inspirations, telling me about the slogan from Disney. I always get it wrong, but I get it approximately right, about making millions of magical moments. That was the joy he felt in yeshiva. And that's what I feel also in yeshiva. So let's try to make these moments as magical as we can by drawing on the sources from Chazal about what we're doing. When it comes to a fast day, to a tainus, we know that the point of the fast day is not self-punishment. Right? That gets pretty tiresome to people. You know, I didn't destroy the Beis HaMikdash. Why should I have to give up my coffee? The point of a fast day is the introspection. that's supposed to come? Well, why don't they just tell us to introspect? Because when we shake up our routines, and perhaps the most basic routine is that of hand to coffee cup, spoon to bowl of cereal, whatever it is, and that cannot go in place, it gets us to think. Now, thinking can be very positive or it can be very negative. Dr. Carton can probably tell you a lot more about that. And therefore, this world of what's called Cheshbon Hanefesh, literally the accounting of the soul, means a lot of different things to different people. The questions that I saw coming in and some of the sense that I got is it deals both with the macro and the micro. People had a lot of time to think. Some people focused on very small things, sometimes even obsessed about them. Some people started thinking very huge and wide and big pictures and started thinking about very major shifts to their lives, to other people's lives. So let's try to take it piece by piece and see the basic Cheshbon HaNefesh, the classic Cheshbon HaNefesh, where it can go right and where it can go wrong, and then apply it to some of the corona-specific thinking that some people have been having. The roots of Cheshbon HaNefesh are brought in the Mesilas Yesharim, brought from Chazal, and the basic theme is that any person that takes their life seriously is going to have to do some accounting. That's the only way to succeed. Just as a businessman cannot run his business without checking from time to time to see how things are going. What's positive, what's negative, what brings profit, what brings losses. So too, a person has to set time to look at their life, to do this cheshbon, which is called cheshbono shel olam, the big cheshbon of the world. But then Chazal bring it down into our private lives. Schar mitzvah keneged avera, the reward of a mitzvah versus a wrongdoing, right? Hefseid avera keneged schara, the loss incurred by an avera as opposed to its possible gain. But it goes far beyond lists of particular sins, one or the other. The Chovos HaLevavos teaches us that everything in life basically winds down to a spiritual positive or a spiritual negative. There's nothing in our spiritual life which is parav, which is neutral, which is Switzerland. Okay, so therefore, that idea of Cheshbon HaNefesh is looking at the flow of positive and negative in our lives, stepping back to see it, and that can often be very positive. But here comes a story, and this story changed my whole world of looking at these things, and it's very important for understanding many teachings of Chazal. I was talking to a great teacher here in Eretz Yisrael, Rav Noach Orlowik, and he told me that he heard both from Rav Shlomo Wolbe Zatzal, a very classic teacher of Musar, and another lesser-known Baal Musar of Zadel Epstein Zatzal, who was the Mashgiach in the Torah or Yeshiva, that when people are starting their path of Cheshbon HaNefesh, they want to try to start to introspect. They want to take a look at their lives. It says the only thing they should be doing is looking at the positive, not looking at the negative. Now, this was a shocker because we tend to, define our classic Cheshbon HaNefesh, the accounting of the souls. Let's take a look at what I've been doing wrong. Let me try to fix all the things that are wrong with me. Obviously, that's one of the reasons why people don't like to do it, right? Who wants to do that? Who wants to rub their face in it so much? So Rabbi Orlowik said he was shocked, and he started stuttering and saying, but all the great works of Musar say that you should do Cheshbon HaNefesh, not only to look for what you do wrong, but as the Mesilas Yesharim says, even the things you do right, there still might be something wrong in there. Look for that as well. Are they wrong? Rav Wolbe told him, no. He says, what they're describing is correct. I'll give you a simple mashal, simple parable. A man comes to the doctor, complains about terrible stomach pains. The doctor examines him. He says, I see what it is. You have an ulcer. He said, Doc, what can we do? He says, well, there's a simple operation that could fix it. Okay, when do I get it? He says, you don't. He said, why? He says, because you have heart problems. Your heart is weak. You can't get that operation. For whatever reason, he said, in our generation, people do not have the fortitude, the foundation of knowing that they are essentially good, that they can do good, and having to look and find those things that are wrong, simply convince them that they are bad and that they're hopeless. Does that mean that we'll ignore wrongdoings that we do? Of course not. There are enough that come up to our main screen that we know that we have to deal with them. But until a person builds that foundation of understanding the fact that I'm good and I can do good, don't go there yet. It'll be dangerous for you. You won't make it. Now, this Cheshbon Hanefesh, which is described in the Mesilas Yesharim, who says there are two parts to it, looking for the things you do wrong in order to stop them, but also looking at what you do right in order to increase them. And just as the Yetzer Hara, that opposing force, wants us to not notice the things we do wrong so that we'll simply continue with them, he wants us to not notice the things we do right so that we won't repeat them and realize the power that we have to do good and to do right. So what could be that danger? Let's find a powerful illustration of the danger of the negative. And again, many people have done this and do this, especially when they have too much time to think. One of the dangers of Corona was that so many people had too much time in their headspace, too much time to replay things, to ruminate, to overthink things. And even if something there is wrong, putting it in the wrong perspective can paralyze us. Listen to the following story from the Talmud Yerushalmi, the very end of Maseches Peah. It's talking about questions of tzedakah. It tells the story of Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, who were going to a bathhouse in Tiberia. Tiberia has the very famous hot springs. They were going to the bathhouse. As they were about to enter, a poor man came over to them, and he said, "Please, give me money, support me." They told him, "Okay, we'll help you out. We're just going to the bathhouse. When we come out, we'll help you." When they came out of the bathhouse, they found that he was dead. They said, "Since we did not merit to help him while he was alive, let's help him now that he's dead." They started preparing him for burial. As they did so, they discovered that he had a purse of gold coins under his shirt. Okay, now the Gemara takes that into directions of the idea of people who are not truly needy of tzedakah and still collecting. But the Lev Simcha, the Ger Rebbe, a couple back, said, "You know what I learned from that Gemara?" He said, "What would have happened to us? Imagine you're about to do your shopping, right? You pull up in the parking lot, you take a shopping cart, you're about to go in, you're in a bit of rush. A poor person comes over and says, 'Please, I'm so hungry, could you help me out?' And you're thinking, I only have big bills, I need to get some change." You say, "Listen, I'm sure you'll be here when I come out. I'll take care of you." You come out of the store, they're dead in the parking lot. He said, any of us would be shattered. We would curl up in ourselves. We would replay that event again and again. We would probably be non-functional for who knows how long. What did these Chachamim do? It could be that at that point they realized they did something wrong. But right now, we have the ability to do good for that same person. Perhaps we should have given him money, we should have given him food, and we didn't, and he died. But he needs us now, and we're going to move forward and do that. And that very energy to move forward actually led them to something that could console them, that they hadn't actually done something so bad. So this paralysis that can come in sinking ourselves into the negative is one of the very big dangers of too much Cheshbon Hanefesh in the negative side. Now, what does the positive Cheshbon Hanefesh look like? First of all, if you try it, you realize how difficult it is. If you ask me today, it's 8:30 p.m. in Israel, how many things I did wrong today, we wouldn't have time till the end of this year for me to go through them, right? I would have to send in fillers. But if you ask me, how many good things did you do today? It's really hard to think of them. And as soon as I think of them, I shoot them down. Well, I did daven shachris today. Yeah, but you had no kavanah, right? I helped that person out with that thing. Yeah, but that's because you want to ask them a favor later. Bam, the missiles go down and you're left with nothing. what you haven't realized are many of the good things that you've done, and you devalue the good things that you've done, and that stops you from having the energy and the morale to do it. The Tanya, in a very famous passage, in Perek Vav of the Tanya, he says that we have to be fighters. He says, if you'll look at two people wrestling, trying to throw each other down, he says, even if one is physically stronger than the other, if he's sad and depressed and down, he will lose. The one who has the sense of positivity, of optimism, of simcha, will win. That's what we must avoid. He said that atzus, that sadness, and the timtum alev ke'evan, that which blocks our heart from all the positive energy and makes it like a stone. We have to realize that doing that is not a holy thing. We tend to think that if we flagellate ourselves, so to speak, even mentally, about all the wrong things we've done, that's true holiness. Now, a person might ask, wait a second, what about this story about the person who heard the Cheshbon Hanefesh of the Chavetz Chaim before he went to sleep, crying and wailing? What about the one who heard the Cheshbon Hanefesh of Rav Levi Yitzchak Miberditchev? You have to realize that those people had built that infrastructure, that process didn't make them sad, didn't make them dysfunctional, didn't stop them from doing. They had that strength. It was built, okay? And that is something that we have to have. There's a beautiful story. Again, you have to kind of get into your Hasidic mode for this one. In the world of Hasidim, there was oftentimes a role that was played, what was called a badchan. A badchan, we're familiar sometimes with badchanim, who kind of do stand-up comedy at a wedding, but the badchan who was attached to a certain Rebbe, he had a special job of helping keep the Rebbe on balance, keep the Rebbe's spirits up. Sometimes if the Rebbe was kind of getting too above this world, to bring him down to earth. And the Chozeh Milublin did have such a person. So the Chozeh Milublin was a student of the famous Rebbe Elimelech of Lizhensk. On the first yahrzeit of Rebbe Elimelech, so the badchan saw that the Chozeh of Lublin looked kind of down. He looked depressed. So he came over to the Rebbe. He said, Rebbe, would you like to hear what happened when Rebbe Elimelech came up to heaven after he died? He said, let's hear. Well, Rebbe Elimelech came up to reception in the next world, and there was an angel who looked him up. He said, oh, come, I'm going to show you to your room. And he took him to a room, and he opened the door with a key, and in went Rebbe Elimelech. You want to hear what was in the room? He said, let's hear. He said the room was filled floor to ceiling with all the Sfarim the Rebbe could possibly want to learn. And there was a table with a comfortable chair, and on the table was a steaming cup of tea and a little silver box with the finest shmek tabak, the finest snuff tobacco. And Rebbe Elimelech walked into the room, and he looked around, and he said, look at this. All my life I've been telling my Hasidim to be careful they don't end up in Gehenna, and here I am, and it ain't so bad. And the Chazak clapped his hands and smiled, and he said, I bet that is what happened. What's the depth of that story? This is the explanation I heard from my Rebbe that told the Rebbe. Rebbe Elimelech accomplished a tremendous amount in his life. He accomplished it with great simcha. He accomplished much in learning, in davening, in chesed. But he says you got to realize he did all of that without knowing if he was going to go to Gan Eden or Gehinnom at the end of things. He understood, he had the strength to understand that what matters is doing the right thing now, not marinating in the past, not dreaming of the fact that, oh, I'm such a tzaddik, I'm going to be doing X, Y, Z in the next world, but to know that if Hashem gives me the ability to do good, I'm going to do that to the maximum. That's the type of infrastructure a person needs to be able to handle the negative form of Cheshbon HaNefesh and to bring it in the right way. Now, the idea of positive Cheshbon HaNefesh, though, is not just in the past. As the Mesilas Yesharim said, the point in positive Cheshbon HaNefesh is to keep my eye open for good things that I can do, that I have the capability to do, that perhaps I have done, and notice how to be able to do them. In Corona, this was something that some people really turned to the positive. Instead of ruminating inside so much, a person did have the time to start thinking of others, to start thinking of those people who were invisible, to think of those who weren't seen, to come up with creative ways to help people and to realize, you know what, I never realized what my kind word could do, what a short message could do, what a gift of some food could do for a person, whatever it was. I'll tell you a story that really shook me when I saw it, and it's an excellent example. As was mentioned, one of the great challenges during the times of Corona was the idea of having to do Leil HaSeder alone for many people. Alone. One person alone in the house. So I saw a story about a housing development in Lakewood, New Jersey. It was kind of designed for senior citizens. And there was a woman who lived there, and her husband had just passed away not long before Pesach. And she was faced with having Seder alone in her apartment. Now, there was a couple living next to her in the apartment adjacent, and they called her up and they said, we have a plan. We have like a balcony with sliding doors. You will sit on your balcony. We will keep our balcony door open, and you'll listen into our Seder. You'll be able to go along. Okay. After Yontiv, her children called her up to see how she was doing. And she says, you know, it was the most amazing thing. It was such a beautiful Seder. That family sang all the same songs that Abba used to sing. All the Nigunim, all the songs, they were the same songs as ours. I loved it. What happened? That couple had called her children before Pesach and asked them to teach them the songs that her husband would do during the Seder, and to do it that way. That is the power of a person who applies the idea of Cheshbon into what good can I do? What might this person's need be? What's their pain? And what might ease their pain? If a person has learned to do that during that time, then that is very positive. So this, again, is much in the world of the micro. It's in the world of the little. Many people did a lot of thinking in the macro. And when we think macro, we oftentimes way overshoot or deceive ourselves. Rav Aaron Lopiansky, Shlita, the Rosh Hashiva in Silver Spring, wrote a very useful little article about all the grandiose lessons people were telling themselves that they learned. I'm going to appreciate shul so much when I go back to shul, I'm never going to speak a word, right? I suddenly realized you don't need these big, overblown, expensive weddings. We're just going to have a wedding in our backyard, even after Corona, right? He says, these things are all going to go out the window the minute Corona leaves, unless we start making small, real steps towards these grandiose goals that we have. You got to be able to try to be real. Some people really got into a tailspin of feeling that the rug had been pulled out all of their assumptions in life, and they were calling me up during Corona, thinking I had, tons of time to listen to theories about the world and politics and life and such. And some of the plans were getting kind of wild. Many were, okay, Israel did much better in Corona. I have to make Aliyah as soon as they let me on the plane. Maybe, maybe not. Some people wanted to be self-sufficient organic farmers in Oregon. Some people wanted to be self-sufficient organic farmers in Israel, right? All sorts of ideas were coming to people. Here, a person has to know people want to quit their jobs, want to move cities. It's very important that a person have what's called Yishuv Hadat, a settled mind when you're going to work on these things. It's good to re-examine. It's good to have a wake-up call. Sometimes the shift in your life situation really is an aha moment. Sometimes it does wake you up to the fact to say, wait a second, what have I been putting all my energies into? Maybe I've been going on the wrong route. But sometimes you're just panicking and you've lost it. And panic can be very dangerous. In one of the Hoshanas that we say on Sukkot, we ask Hashem to save all different plants from the different plant diseases or pests that may destroy that plant. And then we have a phrase in there, Hoshana Nefesh mi behola, save people from panic. Because just as you can have that worm that can destroy a vineyard, panic can destroy a person. So Rav Wolbe points out a fascinating Vilna Gaon Mishle, Karlinsky quotes it often because he knows how healthy this is for people to hear. And it's a pasuk in Mishle which says, it's Mishle Yutes Gimel, Ivelas Adam Tesalef Darko, the crookedness of a person will corrupt his path, V'yal Hashem yiz'af libo, and he gets angry at Hashem. What's the Vilna Gaon explain? He said sometimes a person takes a path on learning Torah or doing mitzvahs, and then he has to drop it because it was too difficult. He felt that he got no help from Hashem, and he gets angry at Hashem. Why did you help me? In Corona, I decided I'm going to quit my job, and I'm just going to learn Torah. And now we have no money. You messed me up. He says, this is because of your crookedness. Says, every person has to go according to his madrega level, which means their proper place, right? Don't jump, right? Some people decided, okay, that's it. I'm just going to homeschool my kids. Some people decided, I don't know, I'm going to send my kids to boarding school where they won't even send them home from Corona. I heard this line that they said, people who had to homeschool their kids during Corona, right? And they realized that Chabad shlichim around the world have been doing this all the time. They said, now I know why they always go, we want Mashiach now. Okay, so now he says, a person who thinks it through and doesn't jump, lo yikpots, then your path will be one of surety, and Hashem will help. He says, but if you do beli yishuv hadat, if you do it without your mind being settled, then you can end up going on a wrong path. Okay, so it's healthy to think, it's healthy to brainstorm, but before things get into the stage of actually doing and shifting, you really got to think it through. You have to speak it out with advisors. It doesn't mean that sometimes you don't make a shift in life and that can't be positive, but you have to be very careful about it. And you have to see and sense, look at the long term as opposed to the short term. Look at the other people in your life, which is part of Cheshbon Hanefesh. Sometimes in the world of Cheshbon Hanefesh, people have tunnel vision and it's all about themselves. And you have to realize that you're interconnected with so many different people, your family, your community, the other people in a job you're in, all sorts of things that are there, and you have to take all that picture. On the other hand, there is a great danger that we all fall into, something the Breslover called Zikna de Sitra Achra, the old age of the Yetzer Hara, the negative old age. What does that mean? The Breslover said that old age is not something chronological. It's not how many years, how much mileage you have on that body that you've been given. He says it all comes down to, do you have the ability to change? Do you have the ability to change? Are you able to shift? If a person has that, they're young. And if a person, even if they're 20 years old, can't shift, can't change from the pattern that they've gotten into, can't do something different or can't do it in different ways, that person has got old in the negative way. Usually the very word for old, zaken, to us implies wisdom. Ze kana chachma. This person has acquired wisdom. But oftentimes that negative zikna can be there in ways that a person simply can't do things differently, can't shift. Part of the bracha of Corona sometimes showed us that if you can't do things the way you used to, you can do them in different ways and you can enjoy them. And even if it's not your ultimate way of doing it, if that's the way that's best to do it, then you do it. That's what makes a person an Eved Hashem, a servant of Hashem. Sometimes doing things in the way that we're used to and that we want can become almost like idolatry. I have to do it this way because of the way I've always done it. But you can't this year. It might endanger other people. It might harm other people. If you're not able to shift and to see and to do it, not just to do it, but to do it with simcha, to do it with happiness, you've discovered that negative ancientness which can grab even the youngest of people. to be able to do something differently or to not do something, that's the bracha which is there. So these are very broad strokes. As I say, it goes for every individual, and it's really things to speak about. And like so many things in Judaism, it involves balance. You have to try to walk that road. The Mesilas Yesharim himself says that everything in the world is a challenge, this way or that way. And you have to try to tread the path, to keep it on the positive, to avoid the negatives, but definitely to try to absorb, right, the events that you've had and to use them in a positive way. But to have a good friend, to have an advisor, to make sure that you're not going down rabbit holes that you shouldn't. Okay, folks, these are a few broad strokes. If there are a few questions here that people would like to toss, I can try to do so. And again, I'll try to get back to some of the people who, when they signed up, listed some questions with their email address, and you can all send me some other ones by email as well. Wow, Jesse, those are the kids. My gosh, look at that. Wow, people grow up. Hello. Wow. Anything out there? Questions? No, so again, just to summarize, I think that people did ask, what about the big questions of Cheshbon Hanefesh for the Jewish people as a whole, right? When these things are happening, big things are happening to the Jewish people as a whole, whether it was how we were affected by Corona, whether the tragedies, the wars in Israel following, the anti-Semitism in America, all of those things. The approach that I've heard from my teachers is that the main thing you have to do is to try to be a better person yourself. This is another aspect of Cheshbon Hanefesh. You say, but what's that going to do? Don't we have to change the whole approach, if you're in a position of such power, you have to try to think out how you use it. But if not, don't waste your energy theorizing about what the whole entire Jewish community should do, what the Jewish leadership should do, what Jews in Israel should do when you're in America, what Jews in America should do when you're in Israel. You have to realize how powerful each little shift in your own life is, because all of us are connected and all of us are part of one entity. And that's the main thing that a person can and should do. So again, there are very troubling things that are out there, and oftentimes we can expend our energy in things that we really have no approach to and no ability to change or to do or to help. So that's where I think a person has to try to do that healthy Cheshbon Hanefesh within themselves. Just be a better person in each way that you can, right? Try, and always in small bites. Rav Wolbe's Sefer is filled with this idea that the only way you're going to progress is by doing something little by little. He'll speak about something, he'll say, try doing this for 15 minutes a day. Our immediate reaction is, but for 23 hours and 45 minutes, I might be doing the wrong thing. That's true. But you're never going to get to where you should be unless you do it in very, very small bites. Okay.
Rabbi Schuster, I'm sorry to interrupt. It's Donna here.
Hey, Donna.
I thought if I could just maybe read you one or two questions that did come in from some of the ones that came in online. I think that you're a little bit addressing it now, but I'll just ask, and I won't say who asked it. It was a very good question. How do we distinguish between natural circumstances and hashgacha? Meaning, how do I know if the message is for me or not?
Yeah. Again, there are many different approaches to hashgacha in the world. I definitely follow the Hasidic approach, which again is spread not just in the world of Hasidus. Basically, after the Arizal became the predominant approach throughout Am Yisrael, that everything that we see, everything that we notice, has some type of message that we can and should be thinking about. It doesn't mean that Corona was your fault and God's telling you, but anything that we see, even events in life, are things, once we notice them, are supposed to perk something up in our mind. And each person can and will learn their individual lessons from it. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu's GPS is so good that every event in the world has every person in mind. Each person that's there that sees it and senses it. So to simply pass it off and say it is Teva, even the Rambam, who is, so to speak, often classified as not having that same view as the Arizal, makes his famous statement that if a person sees a tragedy happening in the world, and instead of crying out and trying to change things, says, it's mikra, the famous t-shirts, stuff happens, or whatever version you may see of that. So he says that is achzariyut, that is cruelty. Why is that cruelty? Because Rav Wolbe explains that the word achzar is a compound word. Achzar, totally foreign. That means that I'm denying the fact that everything that's happening connects all of us. And when it's happening someplace in the world, if it's happening to someone, of course I'm connected to that. I'm part of it. And therefore, I should react to it. And I should do what I can in order to help it. It sounds like a very daunting, huge weight to put on our shoulders, right? But again, all that's asked for us is to do what we can in our world, right? In that way, not to say somehow I'm supposed to protect the world against all future pandemics, but what can I do? I'm an accountant, right? How am I going to do that? Each person, by doing the good that they do, that's the flip side of that idea of hashgacha. That small kindness that I do that nobody else sees but me and Hashem can change the entire course of history. So that's the flip side, that very major things can be. We see this in the stories of the Churban. Okay, we see when Chazal and Maseches Gittin talk about the destruction of Beis Hamikdash, on one hand, they talk about huge community-wide problems that brought that destruction. Sinas Chinam. But when you read the stories in the Gemara, they give very, very specific stories of cruelty that sealed the fate of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Not just the story of Kamsa Bar Kamsa, which is at the beginning of the Gemara that everybody leaves on Tisha B'Av. Toward the end of that Gemara, there's a story about an apprentice who wanted to marry his boss's wife, and he convinced him to divorce her. He lent his boss the money to cover the ksuva, and then he married that wife. And when he came to the boss and said, you have to pay me back the money, the boss said, but I don't have it. He said, that's fine. Me and my wife need a servant. You can serve us. And it said that he was pouring a cup of wine for them. And as he did it, a tear fell into the cup of wine. And that sealed the fate of the Churban. So we know that Midah Tova Meruba, that the good side is always more powerful than the bad side. So that small act of kindness, that small thing that can dry a person's tear or prevent a person's tear, can build the Beis Hamikdash. That's what they were showing us by that. Those are the two sides of these big events and small actions in terms of hashgacha.
I have another question, unless there's somebody else that would like to ask.
I'd like to ask.
Yeah, Danielle, sure.
Hello.
Hi. So talking about Cheshbon Nefesh in this year, we talked a lot about like hashkafa and to try to find the good. And I was wondering if you have a couple tips for actual tachlis of how to integrate Cheshbon Nefesh more into your life. So like one thing you said before is maybe talk to like a mashpia or a rabbi or a friend and try to talk things out. What other things, if you're like very busy working kids, how can you add a little more Cheshbon Nefesh tachlis into your life?
Yeah. Look, everybody needs a little bit of quiet time, right? Some people did discover that as a benefit. And to be able to run the films a little bit, to be able to run the films, if you complimented a coworker on her sweater and she smiled and said thanks, oftentimes at the end of the day, you will not be able to recall that. You won't be able to do it. So trying to take little bits of time, you can't sit every day and watch through the films of every day. That's too much. But taking, like, so to speak, from the security cameras, little snippets, right? You take coworker A and you say, let me run the films of some of my interactions with her this week and how it went. And you noticed someplace there where you were able to help that person. Good for them. That's a tremendous thing. You've discovered gold, right? When you have that. So this is what's described. The Mesilas Yesharim talks about 3 stages like of Cheshbon. One is before you're entering a situation to try and have a picture of how you would like it to go based on your values. While you're actually in the middle of it, that's usually where you lose it, right? Because you had a perfect picture. I'm going to have this interaction. I'm meeting this person. Sometimes it's tricky. I'm going to play it this way. Even if she says this, I'm going to react in the right way. 2 minutes in, it's gone. So that's the second stage, which he calls the fakeach, pikuach. Keep your eyes on it while it's happening. Try to pay attention based on the plan that you had. Afterwards is to replay the films a little bit, okay? But again, making sure that the Yetzer Hara doesn't warp those films into being much more negative than they should, right? Or into places that it shouldn't be. Those are the powers that we have, the power of imagination, which gives us the ability both to project and imagine scenarios beforehand and how we would like it to be, and to look afterwards, right? To see. There were some rabbis who gave the advice to husbands, it can apply to wives as well, that while your hand is on the doorknob of your home, to imagine any possible situation that might be coming in there, try to prepare yourself to react in the right way, and then open the door, right? And then sometimes, maybe when you're going out the door the next way, to try to think how it went and how you might improve.
Thank you, Rabbi. There's a great question in the chat that I'll just read out loud here. It says, how do you balance extracting lessons from daily events versus overanalyzing things?
Yeah. In general, each thing we're looking at has to be with a light touch. Rav Wolbe says a beautiful thing about thought, just thinking in general. He says, you got to compare thinking to playing a violin. He says, if you speak to a violinist, if you really press that bow hard on the violin, you're going to get screeching. The only way to get those notes properly is with a light touch. So also, when you're looking over things, and you'll see, you wait for things to jump out to you. That's kind of the hashgacha that's involved in that, and the message that's involved there. If not, move on. We all have enough things that we can be working with and using that we don't have to dig and go too much in that way, right? It's also very important to know, and this is really a whole share in and of itself, that even difficult things that happen in our lives, right, aren't necessarily a one-to-one message to me that I have to figure out, I have to improve X, Y, or Z. I got strep throat. What is God telling me with the strep throat? What do I have to improve? I don't know, right? That's not in these things. Sometimes there's a very clear one-to-one correspondence that jumps out at you. But otherwise, move on. Just assume that that was a challenge that you're supposed to have in your life, and your avodas Hashem is in the context of that challenge. And not that it's giving you a particular message that you have to change things this way or that way. Just at that point in your life, you're called upon to serve Hashem in a time of sickness as opposed to a time of health. That's a few ideas on it. Okay, folks.
I think maybe we have time just for one last question if anybody has one. Otherwise, we can wrap up. I'm just trying to go through the images. Anyone else here? Interesting, Rabbi Schuster, you addressed many of the questions that people had sent in just through your remarks. So it seemed that really you were very in sync with what people were looking for. And I really appreciate and thank you for taking the time tonight to share with us your words of wisdom. I know for me, it was felt very good because I think that we've all been through a tremendous amount, and it almost feels that we have to take this very ominously and very, very seriously. And I think that your words were extremely comforting. I know for me and probably for everybody on the call. So I thank you for doing that. I would like to just say to everybody here, you know that Rabbi Schuster is certainly here for you. If other things come up, I will put my email address in the chat because that's the one I know off the top of my head. And I can certainly give you a contact information for Rabbi Schuster if you need that. The other thing I just want to let everyone know is if you like these kind of programs, we're very happy to do them. And now this is certainly one of the positives, even though, as Dr. Carton said, for some of us, it has become a 4-letter word, but a 4-letter word that we're very grateful for is Zoom. And it does allow us to connect. It allows us to connect across the oceans, across the continents, and to be able to feel like we can come together for things that are important. So if there are topics that you think that there are people on our staff in the Chappelle's and Midrashet Rachel community that we could uniquely address and that you would like to see, please don't hesitate to reach out, and would love to have your input and help, honestly, to get some ideas and plans for doing more of these kinds of programs. And with that, I think we'll close. It's wonderful to see everybody. Thank you for coming out on a Sunday to share some ideas and connect. Very special.
Thank you all very much. Beautiful seeing you. Bracha and Hatzlacha and everything.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you so much. You have many, many reasons always to be b'simcha. And let's try to help each other keep our noses above the waves of life. All to